So how do you even begin to tell the story of a nation? Is it just one straight line from a starting point to where we are today? Or is it something, well, a lot more complicated? We're going to explore how a huge continent, home to hundreds of different nations, became the single country we now know as the United States.
Okay, so right off the bat, we have to throw out our usual starting point. The story doesn't kick off in 1776, or even when the first European ships landed. Nope. To really get what America is all about, we've got to go back way, way further.
And this is a really big deal, something we absolutely have to get straight before we go any further. The land that became the United States was never, ever empty. It was a continent just teeming with millions of people, all organized into hundreds of unique and pretty complex societies.
All right, so let's dive in. Let's start our story right there. In a time before all the colonial flags and borders, in a land that was already a continent of nations.
I mean, just look at this list, and this is just scratching the surface, you know? You had the incredible political alliance of the Haudenosaunee up in the northeast, the cliff-dwelling Hopi out in the southwest. This place was a true mosaic of cultures.
And we're not talking about small, simple groups of nomads here. No way. We're talking about societies that built actual cities, developed these really sophisticated ways of farming, studied the stars, and created complex political alliances with their own laws and councils. It was a thriving world.
Then everything changes. The arrival of Europeans kicks off a whole new chapter. And this part of the story is all about conflict, colonization, and ultimately, the birth of a really radical new idea for how to run a country.
And you can really see how things picked up speed on this timeline. I mean, from that tiny first English settlement in Jamestown, it took more than 150 years for things to finally boil over. But once they did, man, events moved fast, leading straight into a war for independence.
And this slogan, it just perfectly captures the heart of the whole thing. It wasn't really just about the money or the tea. It was about this fundamental idea that a government can't just force its will on you without giving you a voice. That idea lit the fuse for a revolution.
So, okay, they won the war. Now what? That was the giant question facing the founders. Their answer was the Constitution, creating this really elegant three-part system of government, all designed to keep power in check. For its time, this structure was absolutely revolutionary.
But, writing a rulebook for the government is one thing. Actually building a nation, that's a whole different ballgame. The next 100 years or so would push this young country to its absolute limits with aggressive expansion and a bitter, bitter division from within.
And here we hit the massive, glaring contradiction at the very heart of this era. The nation was founded on this incredible, powerful ideal of equality, and yet its economy, especially down in the South, was built on the backs of enslaved people. That just couldn't last forever.
This split, it went deep, really deep. It wasn't just some moral disagreement. You had two totally different economic and social systems trying to exist inside one country. One was industrializing, and the other was completely dependent on agriculture powered by enslaved labor.
And at the exact same time, this relentless push westward was happening, and it came at an absolutely devastating human cost. This one number represents the tens of thousands of people from several indigenous nations who were forced from their ancestral homes in the Southeast, a truly brutal chapter in the story.
Well, eventually something had to give. That deep division over slavery finally exploded into the Civil War. It was the bloodiest conflict the nation has ever seen, but it ended with the country being, forcibly put back together and, this is huge, the abolition of slavery written into the Constitution. The United States was fundamentally changed forever.
So now we have this remade nation, forged in fire. And its next act? Transforming itself from a war-torn country into the most powerful industrial and military force on the entire planet.
Seriously, the speed of change after the Civil War was just breathtaking. Railroads literally stitched the continent together. Factories pulled millions of people off of farms and from all over the world into these new booming cities. And after being tested in 2 world wars, America's industrial power and global influence were just undeniable.
But here's the thing. Even 100 years after slavery was abolished, that promise of equality, it was still just a promise for millions of Black Americans. The Civil Rights Movement was, in a lot of ways, a second American Revolution.
using nonviolent protest to demand the rights they have been denied for so long.
And that, of course, brings us right up to our own time. The 21st century has brought a whole new set of challenges that are reshaping the country all over again. The shock of 9/11 completely changed foreign policy, while financial crises have pushed our economic systems to the brink. And all the while, the incredible speed of technological and social change just keeps redefining how we live, how we work, and how we talk to each other.
So when you step back and look at the whole picture, you realize there's just no single simple story of America. It's a nonstop narrative of conflict over its own founding ideals, of constant reinvention when faced with new challenges, and of just relentless and often really painful change.
What a journey, right? From a continent of countless nations to a global superpower. But the story isn't over, not by a long shot. It's being written right now, by all of us. Which leaves us with the biggest question of all. What happens next?